This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk about the recent Nintendo Direct, a potential PlayStation 3 game getting a remake, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 37. I am your host, the man whose jiggle physics match those of Mario in the latest Mario and Luigi trailer, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who is looking forward to finally playing as Link in the new Zelda game, Justin, better known as I Am Zeracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
Not bad. It's been pretty okay. Before I actually do say more stuff about the week, I do actually want to make a slight correction to something that I stated last week. And actually I made a comment on the video we made, which was for the story of Expedition 33. I said that the story in the trailer was very vague, but after going back and looking at it again, I realized that actually there's a pretty established story. And it's about a group of a team known as the Expedition who are trying to fight this, I guess, I don't know how to describe it, but an entity known as the Paintress who paints death. And so they're trying to go and put an end to her. And that actually is one of the reasons why, in addition to the turn-based combat, but one of the reasons I was interested in the game was because that premise reminded me of a Dark Souls or Souls-like side mission or storyline, so I just wanted to make that correction there. But as far as my week, though, not bad. I went to my sister's house for Father's Day, just because her boyfriend is, technically my niece and nephew look up to him as a father, so had some fun there. He got a new grill, so he was very happy to take that out for a test drive, and it was good. I enjoyed that aspect of it. And I mean, had today off, so that was nice to do. So got to sleep in. But yeah, not really too much of an eventful week. But yeah, how's your week been?
Pretty good overall. Past couple days have been a little more tiring, but otherwise, it's been pretty good. So I can't remember if I've mentioned this before. I'm sure I probably have, but typically for Father's Day and Mother's Day, respectively. Mother's Day, I give my wife a full day off the Saturday before Mother's Day, so she just doesn't have to deal with the kids. She just has free reign to do whatever the heck she wants to do. And she does the same for me for Father's Day. So this past weekend on Saturday, after I took care of a couple things that I just needed to get done in the morning, I spent almost the entire day playing video games, and it was glorious. And I'll get into what I played when we get to that portion, but it was really, really nice. And additionally, I was able to get some recording done for some of the games that are coming up for the comparisons that I'll be doing next. I may switch up the order of what I originally had planned, especially because with there being a gap in between when I publish stuff, since the last thing I published was a couple weeks ago, I don't want it to be like, the algorithm says I'm not going to show any of your content. So I figure do something that's more current, more relevant, which would be Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. Make that like my first one when I come back, and then do the other ones. But anyway, so I recorded a few of the games, or rather, I recorded the gameplay for two, for both the Switch and the Steam Deck on 2 full games, and then one game I've only recorded the Switch gameplay so far, but I'll record the Steam Deck one probably this weekend. But anyway, I think that's about it. It's just been a little interesting figuring stuff out with everything. So nothing serious by any stretch. Just trying to get stuff enough done ahead of when I come back to publishing weekly, to where I'm not going to be stressing out so much, and I'll just have the hardest part of the work already done. So anyway, what have you been playing this past week?
Well, I have I because after dealing with my computer issues, I finally went back to playing Ghost of Tsushima, and it's so good coming back to this game. It's been such a blast. I've partially did some of the story quests just because I went back and got my father's armor, which I must say, after you fully upgrade it, it looks wonderful. I like the design of his armor sets, so I've actually been using that now. But I also went through a couple other quests. Like, I finished the last Kenji mission, and actually I kind of messed that up because you were supposed to stealthily kill the people who are the band of robbers who he's trying to meet with.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I messed up and thought that I had failed because I was supposed to be stealthy about it. But then I realized, no, you actually can complete the mission with a full-on fight. So
Yeah.
there's that. I mean, I felt bad because I didn't complete the actual objective, but it's done. I also went through, I can't remember what her name is, but the caretaker for, oh gosh, I can't remember her name, but
Are you talking about the gal who was taking care of the Sakai estate?
yes, her. I went through her storyline, and I must say that ended up being a whole lot sadder than I had initially thought it was going to be. Just because that was going to be one thing, and then while I think it was the second mission, she still had to keep going. I thought, is this going to go where I think it's going to go? And yeah, that was very sad. But it was I enjoyed it though. I also just unlocked the missions where you have to go around dueling the 5 Ronin.
Nice.
That's pretty fun, I must say. I've done 3 of them so far, but I'm definitely enjoying that, and I was trying to do all of them just because I was enjoying it, but several times there were local side missions that just popped up and they interrupted me, and so I was like,
Right.
all right, I'll do that. But
Yeah.
all in all, it's good to be back playing this game. I am loving it again so far. Also, I've been playing just because, again, I'm just going to try and go through all the achievements and whatnot, is Halls of Torment. I also realized that there is another character that I had to unlock, and I played this character. And this character, I feel, can be very good, but you have to get to the point of making that character work, because it's a character where he's weak at the beginning and insultingly weak, but as you level him up, his attacks can become much more powerful. But it's just like you have to endure like going through a whole lot of torment before you can actually make a very solid character build. So that's that. Also played some Daemon X Machina again, just because my friend and we went back to that, trying to get him some better gear, and some better items and whatnot. I almost want to suggest, because we've been going through the same, expedition missions, I want to say, well, we could probably go try finding out one of the giant immortals, especially since those will drop some very good gear, especially if you're farming, trying to get the better pieces of equipment. I think that's something that can be fun and also break up just going through each section or each dungeon, you could say. But yeah, there's that. And wait, what was the last game that I had? Oh gosh, there's one more game. Well, I'm trying to remember what the last game is, but I do know that pardon?
Bloodstained.
Oh, Bloodstained. Yes, that was what it was. Bloodstained. So Bloodstained had a new, and actually it's the final DLC for the game, which has been a long time. It's been a long time coming to this point because I know that Coach Igarashi was trying to get through all of the Kickstarter promises, and this is like, I don't even think this part was one of the goals, but just something he added it. No, it wasn't a goal, because this actually was a paid DLC. But he finally got through it, and this is the last one. And I didn't record the DLC just because it's a major spoiler for the actual in-game story, which is why I'm using this footage here. But because it takes place after the end of the main story.
Gotcha.
But it's definitely hard because similar to the footage I'm playing, which is considered Classic 1, this one is called Classic 2 because it's following the gameplay style of the original Castlevania games. And
Gotcha.
specifically for this one, Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. So it has the same sort of blocky, clunky movements and stuff like that. And of course, whenever it becomes night or night in the game, because they don't have the same version of night, enemies are a whole lot stronger, and it definitely makes things more challenging. So if you aren't a fan of NES style Castlevania games, you wouldn't necessarily like this one. But if you still just want to go through it for the challenge, or just because you want to see what could happen, because I'm wondering if what happens here could set up a sequel for Bloodstained, especially since how Bloodstained ended, it was pretty solid. It was a nice solid conclusion. If this opens up something for a sequel, then someone might be interested in that. But I'm getting through it so far. I've made it through several towns, but I haven't really found any bosses yet. But I am trying to just like get enough equipment and weapons so that way I won't die easily. But yeah, there's that. And then just like one last thing that I just thought about was I played a little bit of Super Mario Brothers 3 just for a video I was making.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's what I've been playing so far.
Cool. One thing that I noticed, you're in Daemon X Machina, the fact that you're was it Arsenal? Is that what they're called?
Yes.
That it was Samus paint job on it.
Yes. And the funny thing for that is I had seen a screenshot someone had took in a just like in the community post, and so I thought I'm going to figure out how they did it. So I looked at it and I kept going through all the different pieces of gear and equipment, trying to figure out how I could match it piece by piece, and then trying to just like slowly adjust the colors until I got it to match. I was like, finally, I have it. I have Samus.
Nice.
But yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, as far as what I've been playing this week, there's several different titles, one of which is going to be really obvious, and it's where I spent the bulk of my time, and that's Ghost of Tsushima. So, right now, I am at the point where I am most of the way through Act 3. Basically, at this point, all I really have left is, I'm more just kind of clearing up the map. I have maybe, I want to say, a few more of the Inari shrines left to find, and I have probably some more. Well, I definitely have some more areas to liberate. I'm not really sure where all they are because I still have quite a bit of fog on the map. I've done all the loyalty quests. I think the next story mission is the last one. It might be the last one or the second to last one. I'm not entirely sure, just because it's been a while since I played. But I'm basically just, I'm trying to 100% the game. The only thing I might not do before finishing it would be getting like every one of like the Sashimono banners, or on Iki Island the Sakai banners. And I think that would pretty much, and I guess maybe like not doing the Mongol artifacts, maybe not getting all those. So like some of the remaining collectibles are the kind of thing where I might save those for later, because those, pretty much you can get just wearing the traveler's, traveler's attire, or whatever it's called. But anyway, yeah, but I have like I have all the armor sets, everything's fully upgraded, have all the skills, um, completed all the duels, save for anything that's in like the final mission, which I know there's at least one. I think that there's probably a few, but it's like I said, it's been quite a while since I've done that, so I don't remember exactly. Um, but yeah, those samurai duels that you mentioned, those ones were a blast. Like I love doing those because most of them I could get done in one try. Um, it's only like the very last guy that you face after you beat all the rest of them that took me several tries, and even that still was not anywhere near one that I had the biggest struggle with. He's a lot faster, and it's a lot easier to get hit with him if you're not careful. Because like basically all the different Ronin that you face otherwise, they all basically have exactly the same attack patterns. Like they're all relatively the same, and so it's pretty easy. Like once you learn one of their patterns, then it's pretty easy to avoid and or parry most of their attacks, going from one fight to the next. So so yeah, but anyway, it's been good stuff. Definitely like enjoying myself, but also at the same time kind of ready to move on. um I did find out you can actually get the equivalent of the platinum trophy without getting all of the achievements, because the platinum equivalent is for getting all base game achievements. So it doesn't count anything from Iki Island or the Legends mode. So you don't have to do any of those to get that. But you can't get all achievements unless you do Iki Island and Legends. So that's just because there's a bunch of achievements tied to both. Okay. Anyway, other games I played. I did play some more Sifu. Specifically, I just recorded the gameplay for that on both Switch and Steam Deck. I suck on both. That's just really, more than anything, I'm out of practice. The controls are similar enough between that and Ghost of Tsushima to where it wasn't that much of a stretch from that standpoint. But it's mostly just the fact that it's the counters that I had the hardest time with above all else, and it's also just it's just different. It's something that I would have to work at, and I mean at least that game it has that Hades-like system where when you die you can carry over certain skills that you've gained, any permanent unlocks. So as you go, it's possible to get better and better. So that'll make a difference, but it was still interesting to do the comparisons on that, because the Switch version, you're getting mostly 30 frames per second. Looks good. You do get some pretty bad frame drops in a couple spots, but it's not usually when you're in combat. It's more just some of the transitions where it has the issues. But then in Steam Deck, it's just about a locked 60 frames per second. Occasionally with environmental transitions, it'll drop down as low as like 40. The one issue I had that was the biggest problem, though, was when I was doing the prologue, recording the Switch version, because of how bad the glare is on that screen. There were spots where I literally just couldn't see, and the only way I could see it was I had to actually stand up and look down at it, where usually I just have it like out in front of me because I have it under the mount that I use for recording gameplay. And usually I can see well enough that it's not a problem, but for that game it's just like, yeah, forget about it. So did the best I could, but I played through the prologue and the first level for both the Switch and the Steam Deck and recorded those. And then, as we had discussed last week, with the Kingdom Hearts collection coming out, and of course it being 43% off with Green Man Gaming, I grabbed the Kingdom Hearts collection. With Kingdom Hearts, now so far I've only tried playing the 0.2 prologue, which is just it's one of the only things I have not played of the games. So it's basically that and Kingdom Hearts 3 that I haven't played other than like the weird mobile game that they turned into. They just put the cutscenes on the collection. And there are good and bad things about it. The very good is that it looks great. It runs great, both on the Steam Deck and on my desktop. On the Steam Deck, locked 60 frames per second the majority of the time. I had like no issues, and that was just like it ran like a dream, ran beautifully. And that, keep in mind, 0.2 is a PS4 game. So, but yeah, it looks and runs great. Of course, the music, I forgot how great the music is in these games, but yeah, the music is great. On desktop, at least when I'm not also recording through Streamlabs, I'm getting basically a locked 240 frames per second, which is fantastic. When I record through Streamlabs, it cuts that in half, so it's only getting about 120. But I mean, it's still, obviously it's great, and it occasionally will go a little above that, so occasionally a little below. But I hate how much Streamlabs compresses the footage. But for some reason, I've been trying to use NVIDIA, whatever the default NVIDIA recording thing is, and it works for most games. Like I've been doing it for Ghost of Tsushima lately, and it makes a big difference because it doesn't compress the footage or anything. It looks just as good as it does when I play it. But when I did it with like this game and some other games, it always really compresses the video footage, and it's not an accurate representation of how it actually looks on my screen. But anyway, so regardless, I can't talk. So I was trying to record the gameplay for this game with that, and for some reason it wasn't recording properly. I have no idea why. It would record a couple frames and that was it. And it might just be the software needs updated. I didn't get a chance to check it. But the bad thing about this, and it probably isn't going to be bad for people who have only ever played these games on PlayStation, but the controls. There is absolutely no way to remap the controls in game. You can do it technically through Steam, like set up inputs so that buttons match, or so that A does the function of B and so on and so forth. But the problem, of course, is that in game the control displays are still the defaults. And the game itself does not have a way to remap, or, well, it technically does, but the way it has it remap is it shows you a picture of a controller and shows you what, I mean, it doesn't give you the names of the buttons, like it's just blank buttons. It gives you the positions of the buttons and that's it. And it tells you if you want to remap, like it will show the function that it's supposed to do. So like it starts off with, it shows up on the left joystick. So you choose the function on your controller that you want to map to that action. So you press up on the joystick, left, right, so on and so forth. Same with the other stick. And then, with the buttons, it's the same thing. But the thing is that it doesn't tell you what the functions of those buttons is. And even when you change the functions of those buttons, it doesn't change the glyphs in the game. So even though, like, for example, I wanted it to be so that my attack button, which by default is mapped to A on the Xbox controller, X or cross on the PlayStation controller, which is a terrible spot for the attack as far as I'm concerned, since like basically no other game does it that way. I wanted it to be mapped to X on the Xbox controller or square on the PlayStation controller. So I could do that, but it still shows the glyph of either A or B depending on how you have it set. So it just messes with your brain enough to where it's difficult to keep track of where things are sometimes. And especially like if you don't want every action to be remapped. So, like, for example, when it comes to doing the shortcuts for magic attacks, because you're playing as Aqua, who's basically a magic user primarily in Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. And this is actually supposed to be connected to Birth by Sleep. It's a 0.2, a fragment. It's Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep 0.2, a fragmentary passage. So it basically just takes place right after the end of Birth by Sleep for Aqua's story. And I can't remember where I was going with that. But anyway, the shortcuts for her magic attacks, like you hold down L1 and then you press, one of the 4 face buttons in order to do the shortcuts for whatever magic attacks that you have set up. But the problem is, of course, that the glyphs that they show there match to what the game has it as. So if you remapped the controls at all, then it's not going to match up, and you have to try to figure out where everything is. On top of that, the control or the camera is terrible. Like, I thought I remembered it being kind of bad in the old Kingdom Hearts games, but I don't remember it being that bad. And it is just absolutely awful. And I mean, maybe it's just something that I have to figure out how to get used to. I don't know, but I just it's so easy to get the camera completely off of an enemy. Like, even when you have it set to automatic, it's still just absolutely horrendous. I mean, you can do manual camera control, but there's only so much you can do when you have to have your finger on the face buttons for attacking. And so it just ends up being really, really bad from that standpoint. So yeah, there's no graphical options whatsoever either. Basically, the only thing you can do is you can turn off motion blur and chromatic aberration. You can change the resolution, going up to the maximum of whatever your monitor is. And you can set the frame rate max to either line up with, you can go maximum of 120 FPS, or you could do uncapped, and then just set it to VSync with your monitor. So you can very easily, I mean, that's how I'm able to get 240 frames per second. I know that more likely than not, after having messed with it a bit, because like I remapped the controls to where it controlled the way I wanted it to. I had it so that square or X was for attacking, A or X was for jumping, B or circle was for dodging and blocking. It's like, I'm totally fine with that. I can live with all of that. But the problem is, it's just because the fact that the glyphs are messed up by that, and the fact that you can't, I mean, there's no way to adjust any of that it ended up being an issue where I couldn't mentally like wrap my brain around it properly. And I don't understand why Square Enix can't do something as simple and basic as giving us the option to remap the controls. I understand that they had it designed a certain way, and that's fine, but it shouldn't be that complicated. And I'm also frustrated because I can't find any mods that people have done to fix that problem either, because it seems like it should be a pretty simple thing to do. And maybe now that it's on Steam, it's more likely to get the kind of mod support like that. But honestly, I have no idea what's going on with that. That's pretty much all I have to say about Kingdom Hearts. I'm so mixed on the quality of this. Like, I love how well the game runs, and I think the game looks great. It sounds great, both on Steam Deck and PC. I don't like the fact that you can't remap the controls at all, because it's just throwing me off. But either way, I wasn't really planning on playing this a whole lot until after I finished Ghost of Tsushima, because if I'm going to have to learn this different control scheme, I'd rather wait until after I'm done playing a game that has, more or less the default controls that are in a lot of other games. So, That's all for that one. But as I made mention of before, I did get to play some Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, and it wasn't a ton that I played. Roughly about an hour. Technically multiple hours, but it was the same hour I played multiple times because I played a little bit first on the Steam Deck, which is where I started. Looks great. Runs 60 frames per second. Basically locked. Very, very, very nice from that standpoint. And then I continued a bit on PC, where, funny enough, technically, I could get at times around 400 frames per second if I had it uncapped. In fact, actually, one time I think it said like 493 frames per second. But for one, I mean, my monitor doesn't actually display that much. Mine only goes up to 240. On top of that, I was definitely getting some screen tearing and or some stuttering when I had it uncapped like that. And I mean, because I tried doing uncapped with VSync on so that it would just do 240 and then it'd be good. But that wasn't. But it was just giving me like stuttering and stuff, and I may mess around with it again and see if I can get that to work better. But with that, I couldn't. I mean, anyway, I just ultimately decided, okay, I'm going to do VSync and cap it at 120 frames per second, and then it just was a locked 120 the entire time that I was playing on PC. And of course, it looks fantastic. One thing I did have to do. So by default, the game maps the button functionality, at least for jumping and like confirmation, things like that, to what the opposite of what they would be on the Switch. So on the Switch, A is in the B position on that. It's the B position on the Xbox is the A position on the Switch, and vice versa. And because I had played Shin Megami Tensei 5 on the Switch before, by default, I wanted to jump with A because that's how it was on the... jump with B because that's how it was on the Switch. So it's, the bottom button is what you used to jump. And so it was just throwing me off because on the Steam Deck and on PC, if you're playing with either an Xbox or a PlayStation controller, it maps it to B or circle, which that doesn't help because I don't like having jump over there. That just really was throwing me off. And while it's not like 100% crucial since this isn't an action game or anything, there's enough like platforming at times when you're trying to get collectibles and stuff in the environment to where it was just messing me up. So what I ended up doing was I just went into the Steam settings and switch it so that if you use the Switch controller, it would do A and B reversed accordingly. And then I feel like you can have different glyphs depending on which controller you have connected, and by default, of course, it will do either Xbox or PlayStation, but it doesn't recognize the Switch controller. However, you do have the option for the Switch glyphs because, of course, that's what the game originally came out on. So I switched over the Switch glyphs, and then I think I just once I switched that, and I might have done some other setting that I don't remember off the top of my head, but I was able to get it set up so that A on the Switch controller was the confirm button, B was for jumping. So I just played with the Switch Pro controller, and then it felt better because it's like, okay, this is what I'm used to. I'm more comfortable with this. And it was working much better for me, and then I was enjoying myself. Now, I also tried it out on the Switch, which is the only one I've recorded so far for the comparison. So, the Switch version, of course, only 30 frames per second. It looks good, but it's definitely noticeably more blurry. And in the footage I recorded for the comparison, it actually looks much better than it does in person, which is, I mean, will be great for, people who are fans of the Switch and everything. And I think it's definitely worth playing on the Switch. But on the Switch, I played far enough to get to the point of it introducing the actual new content, because when you start up the game, you have the option of, almost immediately after you start the game, you have the option of choosing either to you take this character's hand or you don't take their hand. If you don't take their hand, it takes you back through the original story that was in the base game. If you take her hand, then from that point forward, there's a lot of cutscenes that are common between both of them, but once you get to a little ways in, maybe 5-10 minutes in, it brings up the alternate storyline covering a different thing, which is just basically essentially fan fiction of the Garden of Eden. That's really what it comes down to, because that's typical Japanese storytelling. We don't actually know what the Bible says, and so we make up our own story. In my opinion, this is basically when someone makes a movie without having read the book. That's basically what it was. But anyway, so that aside, when I played the game, most of the content early on is exactly the same as it was in the original game. You get to a certain point, not far in, that it brings in the new stuff. It starts bringing the new stuff, and I basically played just through that point when it starts getting more interesting. And for people who've never played the game at all, it probably doesn't make a difference either way. But for me, who played the first game, I was like, oh, I want to keep playing. But of course I stopped because, number one, I had the footage I wanted for the thing. Number two, I'm not planning on playing the game on Switch. Even though I was kind of tempted, mostly because of the fact that since I had save data from the original game, they let me carry over some of my really powerful demons from the original game to the new version. So I could have super powerful level 99 demons that I could summon. I'm not entirely sure, because it's been a while since I played SMT, whether you can actually summon the high level demons early on, or if you have to unlock certain skills that allow you to summon demons that are higher level than you. But yeah, and then on top of that, also when I got to the point where you can infuse an essence of a demon into your character so that you learn skills from them. It had the option to do that with 3 or 4 different of my level 99 ones from my original game, which I was really tempted to do, but then I was like, man, but that would just make it way too easy, because these are some really high level skills. This is max level magical abilities, and I would just completely slaughter absolutely everything and make it completely boring. But yeah, so I really want to play more of that game for sure. As I was exploring, I was just getting those old feelings that I got from the game, from the original version of the game, where it's just it's a joy to explore, and the music is fantastic, and the combat's fun, and the game, I should say, the game in general looks good on Switch. It's honestly, I think it's one of the best looking games on Switch. One of, not the best, but one of the best. Especially when you're in combat, because in combat the graphics shine much more, because since you don't have all the stuff going on in the environment, they can focus on the character models even more, and so it's just the in combat character models look incredible. They look so good, and I think it would not surprise me if they're virtually identical between the Switch and the Steam Deck from that standpoint. I'll see once I actually do the comparison. Obviously, the biggest difference is the frame rate. The one thing I do want to note is, well, I guess a couple things. First of all, there's basically no graphical options, much like with Kingdom Hearts. The only options you have, you can enable or disable motion blur and chromatic aberration, and you can adjust the resolution and the frame rate. And that's, or I mean, not the frame rate, but the frame rate, like the frame rate cap. That's the extent of what you can do with both versions. The one thing that the original game had on Switch that neither version has now, and by the way, these options are available on both the Switch and the Steam Deck, surprisingly. But the one option that's missing that was in the original version of Shin Megami Tensei 5 is... Oh, actually, you can also turn it on and off anti-aliasing, and you can do it in both versions. Another thing. But you can't change the field of view, which you could do in the original version on the Switch. I know, it's weird.
So
like when they had that in the original version, I was like, What? This is in the Switch version? It's like, okay, sure, and
Why
and
would you
I
keep that?
right, and I increase it. My guess is probably they used it as kind of like a test thing because they knew that they were going to be putting it on other platforms, and they saw that nobody messed with it, or at least that it was such a small percentage that they just decided to leave it out. I'm hoping maybe they add it later on, and they might. I mean, Atlas is, I think, better about that than than like Square Enix, but either way, it's not absolutely essential. I don't feel like the field of view is a problem in this game. Like, it isn't, but it would still be kind of nice if I had the option to do it, because I would definitely take advantage, especially on Steam Deck and PC. But yeah, I think that's really about all I have to say on that front. Of course, I also, played Lego games with my boys and played Mario Party with them as well, but I didn't record any footage. I think at this point, it's just kind of like I spend a lot more time playing than I spend talking about it, and usually it takes me like 30 seconds to talk about 3 games, and it's like there's no point even doing clips for that. So yeah.
You mentioning Kingdom Hearts, and as far as with like the controls, it reminded me of something which I would need to go back and double check, but I know at least with the controls for navigating menus in the Japanese version of Final Mix, at least the PS2 one, X and circle, or cross and circle, were reversed, where
Right.
circle selected and cross was the cancel. And
Yeah.
I can't remember if circle acted as attack or not instead of cross. So I'd have to go back and check to see like if that was actually the case, as opposed to the American version, which,
Right.
cross was attack.
Yeah.
So it's definitely weird that, because of that, they wouldn't have made or allowed you to remap your buttons in the game. But I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the only thing you can do is switch B and A or cross and circle. That's all you can do.
that's so weird. That's
I mean, other than the wonky thing that I mentioned before, where you don't even see what the glyphs are, and you can't. It doesn't change them in game. It just, I hate that. That's garbage.
Ugh.
But yeah.
Yeah, but it's a shame of that. But it, at least on the plus, I mean, on the one hand though, at least it's running well.
Right.
Your second person, like a buddy of mine, he's been playing through the first game. He said he's enjoyed it so far. In fact, he just finished playing Kingdom Hearts 1 in Proud Mode, and so he's going to decide which one he wants to go into next. But, I mean, so far, from what I've heard, people are enjoying it, so that's great. That's, it's finally here on Steam, and it's enjoyable, so at least we got that win.
Yeah. I hope that maybe by some chance Square will actually add some features to make it, possible to do something with it, because it boggles my mind that they don't even give you the option to change the buttons. It's like, it shouldn't be that difficult, but obviously it was a lazy port from that standpoint. They just did the bare minimum. And I mean, it's great that it runs well, but the only reason it runs well is because I think it's just brute forcing it. That's really all it comes down to, because I mean, the most powerful thing that they had a game on was the PS4. I mean, at least in terms of, from that standpoint. And so, of course, my PC is significantly more powerful than the PS4. I mean, like, I'll have to see with Kingdom Hearts 3 how it runs on Steam Deck. I think I've heard some people say that it is possible to get 60 on Steam Deck with Kingdom Hearts 3. I'm hoping maybe 3 even has some graphical options, but I'm not holding my breath. I mean, if I can get 60 on it, I'll probably be happy with that. But I would imagine probably they would have the option to go higher than that on Steam, at least. I mean, on 3, because if even the previous ones have the option, minus all the other graphical options, seems like they should. But anyway, all right. Any other thoughts before we start talking about this Nintendo Direct?
No, sir.
All right. So, as we mentioned, of course, yesterday we had a Nintendo Direct, and this may be the very last one for the Nintendo Switch before the new hardware is revealed. Or rather, it may be the last mainline Direct. I still think that they'll probably end up having like a mini or an indie showcase or something like that, or a partner showcase, something like that. But more likely than not, this is the last like mainline Direct that's just for the Switch. So, let's start talking about some of those games. So just like with last week, we'll alternate on what games we want to talk about, especially if there's anything we have in common. So, start us off.
Alright, so I'm going to start off with Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. This, definitely seems... It definitely catches your attention because this is one of the few titles where you actually play as Zelda. And I'm not counting the CDI games, because those were, outside of memes, not that great. But this is one of the few times you actually play as Zelda, and, that's definitely unique. But unlike with a lot of these other modern games, they're not trying to just girl boss her up. She actually plays as you would expect in canon because she is very proficient in magic. So all of her abilities, her summons, that's pretty much in lore. So it's great there. Also, the game's returning to its top-down roots. So that's, very good for people who enjoyed the older Zelda titles as well. But yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely going to be a good entry. I going back to what you said earlier, it would have been funny if some people, or at least if Nintendo had maybe made a joke saying like, you now get to play The Legend of Link, and then Echoes of Wisdom. But yeah, I mean, definitely seems like it'll be a pretty solid game. I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of a mainline Zelda game that was what I would consider bad.
Yeah. That's fair. So I have mixed thoughts about this game. On the one hand, like, I don't have a problem with how they're, changing up the gameplay, but I'm also just not convinced on it. I mean, I'm a big fan of, very puzzle style gameplay, of course, and this one is puzzle heavy for Zelda, as opposed to being the action kind of thing, action adventure thing that you have with when it's Link as the main character. And so I like the fact that they, like you said, that they're not just girl bossing Zelda, that they're actually giving her abilities that match more with her. And I could definitely see some things that some ways that this could be like really interesting, really unique, kind of like what they do with particularly Tears of the Kingdom, where there's a lot of different ways to approach different situations with being able to make copies of items and then set them up in different ways in order to achieve your objectives and everything else. And I find that really interesting. My big thing is I'm just a little bit unsure about how it's going to, whether it's going to be something that just gets kind of stale. Like, is there a lot of stuff that I would assume most of the stuff revolves around making use of that, but it also just seems kind of weird in a sense that you have like, okay, it's not as much of an action game, and yes, you can technically still fight enemies, but it's done in a very different way. And I don't know, I need to see more to be convinced about this. I'm afraid that you're gonna be spending more time just messing around, like not actually doing anything, or that it's gonna feel kind of like almost immersion breaking to have Zelda's not even having to deal with enemies so much, even though Link always has to deal with enemies. And it's just like, it's more of a plot convenience that she doesn't have any enemies to deal with. But I don't know. I mean, it's something that, like I said, I need to see more. I need to... I guess more than anything, I'm probably just going to wait until I hear from someone else that's playing it, that I trust their opinion, that they're not just going to, say, oh, it's the best thing ever because you get to play as Zelda. I don't know. I might have felt differently if this was not actually a Zelda game, and if this was like just like an indie game that was doing the same thing, I probably would have felt a little bit differently. But this, I'm so unsure about it. I need to know more. I need to see more. I need to be sold on this game, and I'm not sold on it yet. And to be fair, I'm not as much a fan of the 2D Zeldas. I mean, the only ones I've ever actually completed are two of the ones on Game Boy, with Link's Awakening and Oracle of Ages. So those are the only 2D ones I've ever actually finished. And I've dabbled in a couple other ones, but I've never finished any of the other ones. So, unless you count like Phantom Hourglass. So, anyway, we'll see what happens with it. I'm sure it's going to be great. It just I'm not completely sold on it yet, and realistically, it's probably okay that I'm not sold on it because the last thing I really need is yet another game to play, since I already have so many. And there were plenty in this direct that definitely caught my interest. Some were more day one than others, but yeah. Any other thoughts on this before we move on to my first game?
Go right ahead.
All right. So since this is one that's wasn't on your list, I'll just go ahead and mention it. So, the Dragon Quest HD 2D, Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D game. Now, of course, we already knew this was coming, and I love the HD 2D art style. I'm not like a huge fan of Dragon Quest. I have yet to complete a single one. Like I played a lot of 9 on the DS and ultimately never finished it, mostly just because the characters had zero personality whatsoever. It's basically just a bunch of blank slates, and so it really was hard to be invested in it after a certain point. And I played a little bit of 11, primarily on Steam Deck. And once again, it's like, I liked that one probably better than 9, but it still just wasn't quite grabbing me. This one, however, I love the HD 2D thing so much that I'm more willing to give this a chance. And what I like about this especially is that while they did in fact also announce 1 and 2 HD as a collection coming after 3, which initially I was like, why on earth are you doing them out of order? And then they said, oh, because canonically 3 comes first in terms of the story. And it is a trilogy, those 3 games. But also they said that, I mean, considering the fact that all 3 are being remade in the same style, you don't feel like you're downgrading. You don't feel like you're going backwards in terms of mechanics or anything, because you're playing 3 remakes back to back that are all connected story-wise, and so theoretically it should still be, really good from that standpoint. But yeah. Anyway, it's a series that I'm like, might be willing to give it a chance. It's not like a day one thing, but definitely down the line, theoretically, I would like to. I still have a couple of the HD 2D games that I bought and haven't played much of yet, so that makes it a little bit harder for me to be motivated for a day one thing, but anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, like you, I didn't know that the first 3, or like 3 was considered the first one, because I haven't played any Dragon Quest games before, but I had thought that the games were similar to Final Fantasy, where each game is its own separate title. So like hearing that, canonically speaking, 3 comes first, I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting tidbit of information there. But I actually saw Dragon Quest I can't remember which one. It was one of the DS games in Nintendo Power, and I was like, oh wow, that looks interesting. And I was partially thinking, I was like, hey, this looks kind of like Dragon Ball. But then I was interested in it, but at the time I wasn't really into JRPGs. And then also I think I'm pretty certain at the time, or at least with Dragon Quest games, those were also the ones where combat takes place in first person perspective, so you don't see the characters in your party, and so that kind of was a turn off for me at the time. But then once 11 rolled around, I was like, this actually looks kind of interesting. I was like, I'm really interested in this series. I want to get into it. But like I think that going back to the older games and like making them the HD 2D is a good choice, just because I really like that idea of HD 2D, just because initially with what Square did with Octopath Traveler, I think it's a great way to have a classic pixel style, but then also sort of revamped for a modern age. So I'm glad that they're doing this, and I really hope it's something that they continue to do more with titles. But I mean, like, yeah, this looks good. It looks great, and I think it's gonna do well. So.
Yep. All right, why don't you give me your next game?
All right. This one is going to be Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, and primarily the reason I was interested is just because the fact that we haven't had the older Marvel vs. Capcom games brought over to a modern platform like ever. We don't even have any of them. I mean, maybe through, say, a retro store on or like a classics on maybe like PlayStation, maybe. I don't know if they have or not, or like one Xbox store, like for maybe like it was on the 360. But other than that, though, they haven't had any of the older games, which are, I think, for most people, they prefer them over the modern ones. Like maybe the newest one they'll like might be 3 Ultimate, or I think that's what it is, 3 Ultimate. But yeah, I know that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was considered by many like the best or their favorite one. So getting all of the older ones and being ported over to new systems is great. One question I have, though, is why it wasn't brought to Xbox. That's like the one thing that I'm very curious about. Because I mean, I don't see a reason as to why it wouldn't be. I mean, it's coming to Switch, and sure, it's... I don't know. It just seems so weird. I mean, especially against the fact that the other Marvel vs. Capcom games, especially with like Infinite, which was the newest one they made. That one was on Xbox, but why this collection isn't on there, and also the fact that Capcom has put their other fighting collections on Xbox as well. Not only like the Street Fighter collections, but also their arcade fighting collections. They ported that to Xbox as well. So I don't know why they wouldn't port the Marvel vs. Capcom there as well. That one just seems a bit odd to me. But yeah, I mean, like for everyone else though, it's great that the game is being brought over. And I mean, especially for people who have probably been trying to play this game through emulation, you don't even have to do that anymore because you have a native port, which hopefully will be good.
Yeah, I've always loved the look of these. I love like the fluidity of them and everything, and just, of course, I'm a huge fan of like old school Marvel and X-Men and all that stuff. Just like I love it, but fighting games are just not for me. Not anymore. Like that was my bread and butter when I was a kid, before I got exposed to other types of games. But I was never like good at it. It was basically just I was just button mashing for the most part, with the occasional combo that I'd learn in Mortal Kombat, But for the most part, it was basically just button mashing for me. And although I love so much about the fact that this exists and that it's coming to Switch and that it's coming to other platforms, I just can't think of any good reason for me to buy it, because I will probably never play it. And it's just a shame. It's just I know myself well enough to know that fighting games never keep my attention. They just don't. So, I mean, Smash Brothers did for a long time, but even Smash Brothers hasn't kept my attention anymore. And like, if Smash Brothers, which is extremely fun and arcadey and everything else, doesn't have all the hardcore crazy combos and all that, if that can't keep my attention as much as I love it, then this one is probably not going to do any better. So it is what it is. All right, any more thoughts on that before going to the next game?
No, sir.
All right, so there's this other game. I can't remember the full title, but it's MIO. I think it's Missing in Orbit or Mission in Orbit, something like that. It's like a 2D, what appears to be basically a Metroidvania, and kind of gives me like vibes similar to Ori and the Blind Forest. I just thought it looked cool. Definitely one of those where I don't know for sure whether or not it would be something I would actually enjoy, but from the gameplay that they showed, it looked pretty good. You're like a robot that seems to have hair, and I don't know. It's just it looked like it could be a pretty interesting kind of like fast-paced action Metroidvania with some good platforming stuff, and I enjoy all of that, so it definitely had my interest.
Yeah. I was like, saw that, and I don't know why I didn't think too much about it, but I mean, maybe I could, give it a try. I don't know. I mean, granted, I'm always up for Metroidvania, but I guess the only reason why it didn't really click too much with me is just because I have been sort of playing, or at least I had been playing a few Metroidvanias.
Yeah.
And that it didn't click for me. Maybe like eventually down the road it'll probably click for me. I'll say, I think I'll give this a shot.
Right.
But just like offhand, like I wasn't too necessarily captivated by it. I mean, it did look solid though.
Right.
Just not something that at the moment I was thrown out. But yeah, like that's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I was wrong. It's Memories in Orbit is what MIO stands for. So, but anyway, yeah. I mean, it's not like something where I'm okay, this is a day one purchase for me, but more like maybe down the line when there's a physical version, I might grab it because I'm always up for Metroidvania. Not that I am short on Metroidvanias to play by any stretch. Even just counting the ones that I have and haven't played or haven't finished. Mostly just, I think most of the Metroidvanias I just have not played at all. I think there's only maybe one or two that I started and never finished. So, but yeah. All right, what's your next game?
My next game is going to be Fantasian Neo Dimension. And one of the things that actually caught my attention was one of the characters who I looked and thought, wait a second, this looks like characters they're out of Nier, just because of the white hair, black clothing. Looks like either 2B from Automata or Papa Nier, or I guess Brother Nier from Gestalt / Replicant. But then, looking at it's like, oh no, it's a completely different game. It's not Nier at all. And it's like a RPG, actually. Which I think this is like I guess sort of a port from a mobile game, perhaps. I thought
it was originally exclusive to Apple Arcade.
Okay, that's what it is. But yeah, so I was like, okay, that's interesting. But like one of the biggest things that caught my attention was the fact that this is actually coming to Xbox, which is further cementing what Square said about wanting to bring their games to all platforms, which is good. Although the one thing which shortly after confused me was the fact that Romancing Saga 2 is not coming to Xbox, which is kind of weird to me. I mean, maybe it'll come down later down the road, but as far as like Fantasian, that caught my interest it really piqued my interest because of the fact that this is a game that is going to be coming to Xbox, which is going to show that Square is serious about making their games multi-plat, and that's always a win for everyone in gaming. So yeah, that's my thing there.
Yeah, for sure. I can't remember when I originally heard about this game, and then it was pretty recently that I heard the rumor that this was going to be finally leaving Apple Arcade and would be on the Switch and other platforms. But I mean, it definitely has me interested, mostly because for one, you have Hironobu Sakaguchi, classic Final Fantasy creator, involved in the story, and of course, then you have Nobuo Uematsu doing the music, and so it's just like those two combined as it is already have me interested. It's definitely another one where I want a physical version more than anything else. Graphically, like, it's nothing impressive. It's definitely, you can tell that it was created for low spec hardware with the Apple Arcade stuff. Not that it's a bad looking game by any means. I mean, it looks good. But theoretically, it should, run really well on all platforms, and that would be good. So hopefully it's one of those that actually does, in fact, have a legitimately good story, because it seems to be kind of a mixed bag. Now, Hironobu Sakaguchi, I don't think he's done a bad story necessarily, and I haven't played all of his games. I really only played the early Final Fantasies. Or, well, I guess he was involved with Final Fantasy stories up through 9. I don't think he was involved in 10. But, those were all good stories, and mostly I'm just thinking, okay, Square Enix, their stories, depending on the game, sometimes they're just not very good. Like, what I played of, Bravely Default. I thought the story was just extremely, like, JRPG trope heavy, and it just, like, it wasn't anything special from what I played. I mean, I love the art style, I love the music, like, I love the graphics and all that, but I find that the story is just so meh. and I don't know if this is that kind of game. I'm just kind of afraid. Of course, then there was also like I Am Setsuna, which was one of the early Switch games, and that was one of the reasons why I became like more hesitant on some of these games, is because I thought I Am Setsuna, I just thought the story was absolutely bland and boring, and the game itself, like, I regret spending $40 on it because I think it just wasn't a very good game. I think mostly just because of the fact that it was supposed to be inspired by Chrono Trigger, but it didn't even come close to being anywhere near as good. You know, you got a game like Sea of Stars, which is not as good as Chrono Trigger, but it's still really, really good. And then you have a game like I Am Setsuna, which is not as good as Chrono Trigger and is not really good at all. At least in my opinion. I thought it just wasn't good. Like, I didn't like it. I felt like it was a complete waste of my time by the time I finished it. But, of course, at the time, it was like I was desperate for games on Switch because it was around launch time when there weren't a whole lot of options. And, you know, it wasn't until later that year when we started getting a lot of significantly better games. And then it just, from there, the floodgates open, and it was just incredible library all throughout all the years of the Switch. But, anyway.
I want to make one last thing. So I was looking up his information on Wikipedia, and it turns out looks like Final Fantasy X-2 was his last game before he left Square. Though granted, I don't know if this really counts or not as far as what you're looking for. He was an executive producer for that game.
Yeah, executive producer doesn't... A lot of times, all that means is that they were originally involved with the characters that created... You know, they created the characters. Like, so he was probably involved with 10, which would make sense. And then, you know, because the characters from in 10.2 were mostly characters from 10.1, he was given the executive producer credit because of that. Now, it's possible he did, in fact, write the story for 10.2, but I have a harder time believing that just based on the dramatic tone shift from 10 to 10.2. But I don't know. All right. Any other thoughts on that before I move into my next game?
No, sir.
All right, so my next game is Stray. So, of course, this was originally a PS5 exclusive title. Then it ended up coming to PC as well, and then Xbox, and now it's coming to the Switch. I have not played the game yet. It's been on my Steam wishlist for a while. I've basically just been waiting for a good sale. But now I know that this will be a good one to do a comparison with down the line whenever it comes to Switch. But yeah, like I'm always interested in these like different games, and I've heard Stray is really good. But yeah, like I'm even more interested in how it's going to look and run on the Switch compared to the others. Plus, you know, assuming it gets a physical version, which that's the one thing that I really need in order to be motivated to buy it. It could be a really cool comparison. I thought that from what they showed in the trailer, the visuals looked good. Definitely noticed some spots where some of the outer edges of like the cat model and stuff were a bit fuzzy, but not in like the way you would expect them to be fuzzy. Just more graphically fuzzy. But anyway. Any thoughts?
This definitely was a surprise to see coming. I didn't expect to see this title, but I mean, I think it makes sense. It's sort of similar to Little Kitty Big City. I guess as far as I don't want to say like audience, but I guess like that idea, the general idea behind it. So I mean, I can see why they ported it over. I think there could be a physical, even if it's like.
Oh yeah, it'll get a physical for sure. It'll probably be a limited release physical, would be most likely. Because that's typically how it goes with the indie games.
Yeah, I could definitely see it coming. It'll definitely be interesting to see how it performs. I mean, I don't think it should be too bad as far as like in person.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll definitely have to see, and I'll definitely have to see when you make your comparison video.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah.
All right, your next game.
This one is, I mean, I think the reason why I picked this game is going to be obvious, but that's going to be Metroid Zero Mission. It is, yes, it's only a Nintendo Switch Online title, but it's Metroid Zero Mission, which to me is the pinnacle of 2D Metroid games. So, you know, more people get to play this excellence. So I can't complain about that. And honestly, all that did was just make me want to play Metroid Zero Mission again for the umpteenth time, which I might actually do sometime later on. But yeah, you know, I don't have much more to say to that. Play Metroid Zero Mission.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm half tempted to play it through Switch Online, but like because I have Switch Online, so it's not a big deal from that standpoint. But at the same time, I have played this game a couple times already. I have it on the Wii U. I'm curious of whether or not there's any way to play it on 3DS, because I know that like Fusion I have on 3DS because of the Ambassador thing. Zero Mission was not available that way, and it wasn't available through the eShop. But I wonder if, because I have, you know, the modded 3DS, if I'd be able to play it somehow. Because if I could, I would just get it that way. Because it's like, I've already bought the game before, you know, and I'd much rather play it on 3DS than pull out my Wii U just for that. So I don't know. But either way, it's probably not like an urgent purchase, because I have played the game before a couple times. It's fantastic. I love it. But if I'm going to play another Metroid game, I would probably play something that I haven't played, or at least haven't played multiple times. So anyway, always a good choice from that standpoint. All right, well, I think now we're getting to the point where we're going to be talking about, I think it looks like we're down to just 2 more games. Both of these I know are on both of our lists. So we'll go ahead and talk about Mario and Luigi Brothership. Now, I will say I have not played any of the Mario and Luigi games. Not that I've never been interested in them, it's just more like they've never come at a good time. I was really tempted right when the eShop was getting ready to close to buy, I can't remember which one it was, probably Bowser's Inside Story. There might have been another one. But then it's like, oh, this doesn't have 3D. I don't know if I want it that badly. So I have not, I haven't played any of them. But this one, oh, it looks fantastic. I mean, like, visually, it looks incredible, and it looks like it runs really, really well. I mean, I'd have to check the trailer again, whether it's 60 frames per second or not. I don't know if it is, but even still, it looks absolutely fantastic, and just the variety that they have in terms of combat mechanics and stuff makes it a little more interesting than just like a typical like Mario RPG sort of thing. I don't know. I love the way it looks. It definitely has me very interested. Probably not a day one purchase by any stretch, but definitely something I could see myself checking out at some point.
Yeah, this also similar to you. I haven't played any of the Mario and Luigi games before, but they did look appealing to me, and I'll be honest, just because, or at least from what I'd seen in either like Nintendo Power magazine or just through like a couple of small booklets that came with Game Boy Advance games, the Mario and Luigi games somewhat appealed to me more than the Paper Mario games.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, granted, those were just like stills images.
Yeah.
But seeing the gameplay though, it definitely looks. You can tell there is some difference between those games and a Paper Mario game as far as like the comic goes, and also like even I mean, granted, there's still some of those elements of certain mechanics using in like the general world, but Mario and Luigi just seemed like it was different and a bit more unique in that aspect as far as like how you navigate and using your special like abilities as a team, which really appealed to me. But this one definitely looks really good, and like you said, it looks like it is running, or at least seems to be performing pretty well. I mean, maybe this one will be 60 FPS, who knows, maybe. Because I mean, I don't think it should be going through the same, I guess, issues that Thousand Year Door went through, so this seems like a possibility. But overall, though, it does look pretty good. I can't lie.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, I think it's time for the game of the show. So, give it to us.
Yeah, the game of the show obviously was the Switch Nintendo Lite, the Switch Lite. But no, it was Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. And wow, I honestly I think I got to the point where we haven't heard any Metroid news in such a long time that my expectations were pretty low as far as like actually hearing anything, and considering the fact that it's been years since Metroid Prime 4 was even teased. But we have not only a full title because of the Beyond, but we also have a release year, which is next year, which is, it's still a bit of a way, but it is coming. And wow, that actually looks very good. And I mean, from the moment you saw 20X9 Galactic Federation ship, and it's like, oh wow, we're getting back to that. I mean, we haven't seen a 20X since Zero Mission, which was in 20X5, so this is 4 years after Zero Mission, I believe. But sorry, going through that, but and then just like seeing the Samus's ship land, seeing her jump out, hearing the classic sounds. Yes. It was just so good. And I mean, watching the gameplay as well, and it looks like it's pretty much using the same engine as Prime Remaster. Like, it does look visually similar to Prime Remaster, which I thought Prime Remaster looked great.
Yep.
So for it being in the same manner, I have no problems with that. It looks good. I'm guessing, based on what I saw, that the controls are still somewhat similar to the original Prime, just because I did see some lock-on mechanics. I don't know, maybe they'll use the C-stick for aiming instead of like how C-stick in the original games was just for switching your visors. No, it was for switching your beams. But I think like maybe the best thing that they could do is to have the options like they did with Prime Remaster, where you can choose which version, if you want to use a classic style, if you want to use a modern style, or if you even went to use motion controls as well. So I think that would be a best case scenario. But I mean, a lot of it was so good, and I mean, like seeing it end and having Silex there, which I was like, we haven't seen you in a while, buddy. And then also I was very curious because there were 2 Metroids with him, and it's like, okay, considering the fact how Metroids have not been able to be tamed before, like seeing them just like freely floating around is, has me questioning things. And granted, of course, granted, things that happened way after the Prime games, canonically speaking, but that just was like, what's going on here? But I think one of the biggest questions I have is how are they going to connect this with the earlier games? Which, I mean, granted, Hunters had this same dilemma. I think Hunters probably like completely violated this, but how are they going to connect as far as with Prime? Because for all intents and purposes, Metroid Prime, as we know it, is dead. Just because Metroid Prime was the main villain, or at least the final villain in the first game, and then Metroid Prime 2 became Dark Samus in 2 and 3. But with Dark Samus completely eradicated and Phazon wiped out, how are they going to handle it? Like, is this going to be a Metroid Prime in name only, and I guess also because of the first-person shooter style, or will there be some connection? I mean, of course, outside of Silex, since he was in Hunters and also Prime 3 in the end.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But will there be some other connection to that like idea as well? That's what I'm interested in. I'm hoping also that they brought back Kenji Yamamoto for the music, just because I really enjoyed his music in the Prime trilogy. I mean, granted, he did other music for the Metroid games as well, but like, personally, he is what I consider to be one of the big three of Japanese game composers. Like, him, Nobuo Uematsu, and Yoko Shimomura, because they are capable of making great music for initial releases, and then coming back later and saying, you know what? We should go and rearrange our music. So, like, how you have several different versions of, say, like, One Winged Angel, like, starting the PS1 version, going to the fully orchestrated version, to going to Advent Children. Like, he consistently raised the bar each time. And, you know, Yoko Shimomura, with her music in, like, older Street Fighter games, and then also in Kingdom Hearts, and then she does that, and then she says, okay, I'm gonna re-record the music now and rearrange it. And it's like, how are you doing this? And then Kenji Yamamoto from Super Metroid, and you're like, oh yeah, these are some good tracks. And then you play it again in Metroid Prime 1 and Metroid Prime 2, and it's like, oh my goodness, this guy is a genius. And I just really hope they bring him back in Prime 4, because I feel like it wouldn't be the same without him. But I mean, overall though, it looks solid, and it's definitely a day. I mean, granted, it's technically already day one purchase, because I pre-ordered that game back when it was available on Amazon to pre-order. So like, it's just waiting to be shipped. I mean, granted, if they announce a special edition, I'm already on it. I'm already on it. And if they even want to go ahead and have it, which, I mean, I kind of hope they, I mean, if they want to have a Switch edition, you can bet I will buy it. I will buy it, hands down. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and Yoko Shimomura also did some of the music for Xenoblade Chronicles. She did the main battle theme for it. When you hear it, it's like you immediately, like, the second I heard it, I was like, this sounds like Kingdom Hearts music. And yeah, I mean, it's like it's very clearly her stuff, and yeah, I would agree. Of course, I would add various other composers within Japanese, various other Japanese composers as well, like Yasunori Mitsuda and Hitoshi Sakamoto, Hiroyuki Sawano to some degree, maybe less so. Trying to think, there's definitely some others, and this doesn't technically count, but Ace Plus, which is really just a combination of various artists, but Ace Plus is incredible. Or just Ace in general, which has done, like, basically, for one, a lot of the battle themes for Xenoblade, for the Xenoblade games, and they're all incredible. Some of the best music ever, as well as some of, like, field themes and things like that. But yeah, so there's lots of great Japanese composers, and from hearing the music in the trailer for Metroid Prime 4, I would definitely say I think it's still him doing the composing, because like the theme when they did the 2025 portion, the music that was playing during that sounded very, very reminiscent of like music from Talon 4 and all that. So anyway, yeah, All right, so let me just start from the top. So I decided not to stream reacting to it, mostly just because it was like, okay, I was already I was working, of course, and it was just 9 o'clock in the morning on a work day. Yeah, I could make it work to where I could, take an early lunch or do a partial lunch so that I could stream it, and then after that, just either take a shorter lunch later or just not take a lunch. But I opted not to. However, I wish I had been able to get my reaction to this trailer on camera, because I definitely initially when I saw the green letters, I'm like, wait, is this Metroid Prime 4? Is this Metroid Prime 4? Is it finally here? Because of course, I thought that this would have to be the time that they would show it if they were going to show it, with it being most likely the last direct of the Switch, or at least the Switch alone. But then, of course, the second that I saw the ship coming in, it's like, it is. I was super excited, and I wasn't like typical reaction streamer where I'm like, ooh, and like jumping up and down. I was still loud enough that my wife could hear me in the other room. So, I was just ecstatic. And as you said, I think this is definitely the same engine that they used for Prime Remastered, because it looks very, very similar. I don't think I've seen some people say, "Oh, this is Switch 2 footage," and it's like, no, this is the Switch footage. Now, will it probably be enhanced for Switch 2? Probably. Is it going to be cross-gen? Probably. My guess is basically the difference between the Switch version and the Switch 2 version is going to be that the Switch 2 version will have the option for 4K upscaling. But otherwise, it's probably going to be basically exactly the same. Just based on, what we saw with Prime Remastered, like, this looks... At least, I haven't seen anyone do a comparison yet, mostly just because I haven't looked for it, but I'm sure that probably if you do a side-by-side comparison between Prime Remastered and Prime 4, they look virtually the same in terms of the visual quality. And it's just like retro, showing that they still got those chops. They can still make a really great looking, great running game. 1080p 60 on the Switch. They did it with Prime Remastered, which was a huge visual upgrade, and the footage we saw here was 1080p 60. So, I'm super excited about it. And of course, there also was the Nintendo Switch logo at the end, so that confirmed that it is in fact Nintendo Switch. And obviously, they haven't said anything about it being cross-gen, but it seems very likely since it's coming out next year. Let me think. What else? I would say in terms of controls, it's probably going to have all the options that Prime Remastered had. That seems like the most likely scenario. I wish that the motion controls worked better, because the motion controls were great on the Wii version, but unfortunately with the Switch, because it's gyro-based and there's no infrared involved, the big issue that I ended up having when I tried playing Prime Remastered with motion controls was turning around was a big problem. Because it would definitely lose the sync a lot more. It ended up just being a big issue when it came to that. Whereas when playing on the Wii, it didn't have that issue nearly as often. So that kind of ruined it for me, because I thought the motion controls were just perfect on Wii. Like, it completely improved the game as far as I was concerned, especially with Prime 2, being able to flick the stick up for doing the morph ball jump, particularly with the grapple, or not grapple, the boss that you get, the spider ball boss. That one I struggled with on the GameCube version. I never beat it, and then when I went and played it on the Wii version, particularly because of that more fall jump, I was actually able to do it, and it was much easier from that standpoint. But now, the one thing we didn't see here that I was disappointed about was that there was no Metroid Prime 2 or 3. And also nothing about the rumored Wind Waker and Twilight Princess remasters. I'll say probably, at least my theory is, they didn't show the Zelda remasters because they didn't want it to take away from the new Zelda game. Because if they showed these old games, the 3D games are more popular anyway. I think that it probably would have just taken attention away from this new Zelda game that they want to sell. People would have been a lot more interested in those than they would have been in the new Zelda game. And then Prime 2 and 3, I have no idea why. Maybe it's just they're not showing it yet. I'm hoping that maybe they've just decided, okay, we'll show this later, like either later this year in one of the mini directs or something, if they have something like that, and they just drop them after that, or that it will be still dropped before 4 comes out. I'm just hoping they give enough time to where people have time to play through them before 4 comes out, because I would like to replay those. But I don't. I mean, if obviously if they don't release it before 4 comes out, then I'll just play 4 and then go back and play 2, 3 later. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm in the same boat. I want to play the whole trilogy again before 4, but like for 2 and 3, if I can play, new versions that are in the same vein as the remastered versions, I'll do that. I mean, I want to do that, but if I don't want to necessarily start 2 and 3 on the original versions, then have 2 and 3 like come out right after or while I'm playing it, which would be a bit disappointing for me, or rather, I wouldn't necessarily want to feel like or have the urge to play through them completely just because I just finished them on the original version. So like I do hope they come out later. I mean, even if they just like say we're shadow dropping the game, similar to like what they did with 1 remastered, like if they did that maybe around September, like that would be fine. But like, please just like do it. I mean, yeah, like that is definitely was the thing that was disappointing to me. One thing though that I was a bit curious about is the final clip at the end. It seemed like there was a very large world, and it made me wonder, is there going to be some sort of, not necessarily open world, but I guess maybe semi-open world, or I don't know, like just because the way it looked at the end, because you see Samus looking out in like a large area, and then like the world expanded and you see like a whole lot more of it, and I wonder, I mean, the idea is interesting, but I do like having that sort of, not necessarily restrictive, but that structure, I guess that structured layout to things, because I mean, granted, you can still look around, explore, and certain abilities will open up new pathways, but I still like the fact that things did have a structure that wasn't necessarily, you did have some sort of freedom as long as you had the abilities to do stuff, but it wasn't just pure chaos. It wasn't haphazard. So I don't know, I hope they don't necessarily make it open world, just because of that. I know that some people in the past have said that they were interested in like having bounties you could actually collect, like if something like pops up, maybe as far as like a side mission. I don't know if that's necessarily needed in this type of game, but we'll see if that actually happens.
Yeah, I don't think that it's going to be open world. I think that it's probably just like any time you enter like a new area, that it would just basically be kind of like displaying, like doing kind of a wide shot showing the general vicinity of the area, and then it zooms back into the first person, and then it's just like any other normal level where you'll have secrets here and there, but it's not going to be any bigger than the previous Prime games. At least I'm hoping that's the case, because I think that would just be, like you said, that would be better. It was good that they did that previously, and I think that that's what they just need to stick to. No reason to try and fix something that isn't broken. Now, I do hope that there's going to be something to separate it, because, I mean, each one has had something to separate it from the previous one. I mean, of course, you know, the original Prime was very much, you know, it was the transition to 3D and did a lot of fantastic things. Then Prime 2 had the dark and light Aether, and you had that thing, and then Prime 3 had the that special beam,
The hyper beam.
yeah, the hyper beam that was based on using Phazon. That's what I was trying to say. And then it also, you know, technically had multiple planets. What I think would be kind of interesting, though, is if they did incorporate fast travel in, which, you know, basically be like, okay, they have certain landing sites for the ship, but it's all still like it's all on the same planet, just different landing sites for the ship, and like, I don't know, or something else that they could implement that would enable some sort of fast travel, so that there's, I mean, basically to the extent that they did in like Samus Returns and in Dread, you know, where it's not a lot of fast travel. It still doesn't take away the core of that backtracking thing, but reduces the amount of it so that it's not as tedious at times, because sometimes the backtracking in the Metroid games does get a little tedious. And if you have at least some fast travel, it's very helpful to make it feel a little bit better from that standpoint. So,
now one thing that I just popped to the back of my mind, as you were mentioning this, and I thought about something else. Do you think they'll bring back multiplayer in any aspect?
It's an interesting question. I'm going to say no, but I could be totally wrong on that front. So, I guess we'll wait and see. I doubt it, personally. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. All right, any other thoughts on that before we move into our last topic for the night?
No, sir.
All right, so there's a rumor going around, and whether or not this is true, we don't know for sure, but this is a rumor that came from Special Nick, which I believe is from that Xbox podcast we've discussed previously. And he said that there is a remake coming for Uncharted Drake's Fortune, which is the first Uncharted game. Now, I'm going to say, before I get your thoughts on it, all I'm going to say is my initial reaction was actually really positive. And then I thought about it a little more, and it changed. So, why don't you give me your thoughts before I dive into everything else?
Well, I'm sort of the reverse, where I looked at kind of negative, but I mean, I can understand why they're doing it this way. I mean, because granted, before, what I would have wanted would have been just a HD remaster. I mean, granted, they probably already did it for PlayStation, but all I really wanted, as far as like on the PC end, was just get the original games, have them remastered, you know, just make a good solid port for them for PC, and that would have been fine. Like, I didn't necessarily need a remaster. I thought about it, then later on, like, you know, maybe because they're PS3 games and because of how the PS3 architecture worked, maybe it wouldn't have been possible, so they decided, let's go ahead and remake it. I thought, okay, maybe that's fine. Sure, we're not getting all three games, we're just getting one game at a time. But I thought, maybe it'll be fine. But I mean, I think the idea of it being remade kind of makes sense, because of the fact that there is the Uncharted sequel that's in development, and whenever it comes out, this will be a good way to promote it as far as like with games, game wise. So I can understand it. Do I still technically would like to have the collection just because I get all 3 games in one bundle rather than getting a remake? Which, I mean, it could be good, but I still kind of would like to have just like all 3 original games, bring them over, and call it a day. But if it's just like a remake, that's fine with me. I mean, as long as it's decent. But yeah, I mean, at least with this one, it's not a game that has had several remasters, ports, remakes. Looking at you, Last of Us. So I feel like this one, I can give it a pass for getting a remake. It's not like it's gone through several iterations already, so I can accept that.
All right. So, as I said, my initial reaction to this was, okay, this is positive. I like Uncharted 1. Well, I'm a fan of the series in general. Uncharted 1 definitely visually has aged the poorest of the 3. With Uncharted 4, of course, being definitely the best looking, and got the slight remaster and PC port and everything like that. However, as I thought about it, it occurred to me that number one, this sets a potentially bad precedent, because if they remake 1, they're going to have to remake 2 and 3. And the thing is that there's already a PS4 version of the Nathan Drake collection, which includes 1, 2, and 3 at 60 frames per second. And while, yes, visually they absolutely could, I mean, there's a lot of room for improvement. Like, they absolutely could look better, because these were Naughty Dog's first, like, really good-looking games on PS3 before Last of Us came out and then blew them out of the water. But the problem is that it's not like they don't look terrible. And, of course, they run really well on the PS4. And so I would much rather they just port the collection up, because even if it was $60 for the collection, which I think is probably too much considering how old these games are, I still would rather do that than spend $60 to $70 3 times to get remakes of the 3 games. And while, yes, the games could use a coat of paint, a new coat of paint, they absolutely, I think that these are far more deserving of remakes than The Last of Us 1 was. I don't want to spend that kind of money. And I would much rather just have them to bring the collection up, port it over, make it quick and easy, and yeah. So that's really about all I have to say about that. I wish I could be more positive about it, because I do love these games, but it's really hard for me to be positive about it, even though I know that the remake, whenever it comes, is going to look incredible. It's probably going to play really well. I'm sure it will have a bunch of quality of life features, and the first game definitely needs the quality of life improvements that the second and third game brought. But it's still just so hard for me to be interested in a remake of a game that already has a 60 frames per second version.
Yeah, that's actually a good point about how having the Nathan Drake collection ported over would be way cheaper than spending, $180, maybe $210 if it's $70
Right.
per game. That definitely makes a whole lot more sense in that aspect, and I would be more willing to spend that initial $60. I mean, granted, maybe closer to like $50 on Green Man Gaming, but
Yeah.
definitely be more willing to spend like that much money for a full collection rather than paying each game individually, even if it is remade. Yeah, definitely. I understand that aspect completely.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, like if they're gonna remake the games, I would wait for a collection most likely. If I really want to play these games again, because like I replayed one. What was that? That would have been 2022. Yeah, because it was Stack Up 2022 is when I finished it. Finished replaying it. Um, did it on the highest difficulty that you can play by default for the trophy, because I was aiming to get the platinum on it, and um, and I remote played it with the Steam Deck, not so that I could play it on the Steam Deck, but so that I could use the Steam Deck as a controller, so that I could have gyro aiming, which makes a huge difference for the higher difficulties, being able to aim better. But anyway, so like I really like these games, but if I want to play them, as much as I don't like being tied to my PS4, the reality is that the remake probably wouldn't run on the Steam Deck anyway. So I would probably rather just play my PS4 version, and as much as I dislike having to do that, it would still be better than spending a whole bunch of money to get the remakes. So that's all I have to say. All right. Any final thoughts on anything we talked about, or anything else you want to talk about before we close out for the night?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Recommendations and dissuasions. Start us off.
All right. I mean, granted, I kind of technically said this earlier, but I am going to recommend playing Metroid Zero Mission. It is a very fun game. It's not long. It's probably one of the shortest Metroid games you could play, but it's still a solid experience, and it has a lot of replay value, especially if you want to speed run it or try to get all of the items in the game. So it definitely has a lot of replay value in that aspect. But I mean, I guess as a side note, replay the Metroid trilogy, because it's a very solid trilogy and it's very fun. And I mean, if you even slightly dislike yourself, you could even play the DS game Hunters as well. But yeah, that's my recommendation.
I want to follow that guide to get to get Hunters working with dual analogs on the 3DS, because if I could get get widescreen and dual analog, because it is possible to do. There was that video, I'm pretty sure I shared it with you, that you could get a number of DS games playing way better on the 3DS that way, but I haven't taken the time to go through the effort to do that, because I never finished Hunters, and I would absolutely be willing to try it again if I could play it that way. Not with the stylus, because the stylus sucked.
Yes.
And of course the levels were very repetitive and monotonous, so that didn't really help either. But anyway. All right. Well, my recommendation is Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. Now, of course, if you are sensitive regarding theology and you don't like hearing the very bad fan fiction version of biblical theology that they do, which, I mean, it's just, that's a typical Japanese game. It's just bad theology. Then it might be something you don't want to play. But if you can get past that and just recognize that it's just their version of stuff that doesn't match up with what the Bible says, and just enjoy the game as a game, then it's well worth playing. Super great. You can play it on the Switch, or you can play it anywhere else. It's on Xbox, it's on PlayStation, both Xbox One and Xbox Series X, PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. It's on PC, it's on Steam Deck. You can play it just about anywhere, and it is fantastic. So, that's my recommendation.
Very good, very good. And, also, as you said, you can play it anywhere, so
Yep.
you don't really have an excuse not to.
All right, your dissuasion.
My dissuasion. Did I even write one down? Let me quickly check. Let me just make sure. Okay, so I didn't have one written down, but let me think of one. All right, my dissuasion. I guess my for my dissuasion, I will say, do not forget to drink water. It's starting to get warm out, so you will need to be hydrated. So, even if you have other types of stuff to drink, don't neglect your water. That's very important. Yeah, that's my dissuasion.
All right. Well, my dissuasion is actually related to Shin Megami Tensei 5 / Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, and that is don't forget to save frequently, because this game does not have autosaves, and I made the mistake on more than one occasion of not saving as I go along, and this one Vengeance actually has the ability to save anywhere, which is super helpful. But because I got so used to autosaves in games like Ghost of Tsushima and, the majority of games, I made the mistake of not saving frequently enough. And then there was a couple times that I died and I lost. I mean, it wasn't like a ton of progress because I'm still really early in the game, but it was enough to where it was annoying because I had to re-go through some of the tutorials that they do early on. It's just like, and then re-record some stuff or rather, re-get through stuff so that I could record the next part of it for my footage. So, anyway, yes, don't forget to save often. And especially, like, every time that you do something that matters, make sure you save, or when you're about to go into a fight, make sure you save. Usually, I mean, like, if you see an objective marker up ahead, save before you go to that objective marker so that you're not having to backtrack and redo a bunch of stuff in order to get back to where you were. So, yeah. All right. Anything else?
No, sir.
Well, where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel, I am Xeracon, that's IAMXERACON, so youtube.com/I am Xeracon. Put out a couple videos before this past weekend. I put out a video discussing how the ROM site Vim's Lair, had a lot of its ROMs removed at the behest of Nintendo, Sega, Lego, oddly, and the ESA. And then yesterday, after I got home, or at least Wednesday as of the recording of this video, or when it's published, Tuesday, I put out my initial reaction to the Metroid Prime 4 trailer, just because I had not seen it all and I wanted to record it fresh as I was watching it, so you can check that out as well.
Yes, sir. All right, well, you can find me on my main gaming YouTube channel, The Frozen Gamer 87. Nothing new going up right at the moment. I'm in process on getting stuff prepped for July when I'll start putting up regular content again, but there's, of course, those OLED comparisons comparing the Switch OLED to the Steam Deck OLED in terms of how games look and perform on each platform. The next one probably going up, which will be, once again, first week of July, should actually be July 1st, I believe, will be Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. And so that will be a cool comparison to look at. Then you can also find my YouTube cooking channel called Not Authentic But Delicious. That's at NABD Cooking. And this is, of course, also taking a break, but I have various recipes in the works. Some already recorded, and I haven't decided exactly what recipe is going to go up next just yet, but we'll definitely be doing some good stuff there. So there's plenty of that. Of course, you can contact you can contact us for the Orange Box Podcast either via Twitter, which it is at the Orange Box Pod. You can also find us on Facebook. You can send us an email, theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, if you are listening to the audio-only version, we do a video version every week on YouTube. Comes Friday at 7 a.m., barring any issues with processing, which did happen last week. And then the audio-only version comes out on all major podcast platforms, including YouTube Music, Apple Music, Spotify, Deezer, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, etc. Basically, any major podcast platform shows up at 12 a.m. Friday morning. And so, of course, you can listen to us there. And I think that is everything I've got. So, last chance. Anything else?
No, sir. No, sir.
All right. Well, I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zaracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast. And until next time, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Orange Box Podcast out.